Our next speaker, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Supervisor Jane Kim, the first Korean American elected official in San Francisco. She represents San Francisco's District 6, which includes the historic South of Market, the home of the Filipino community. I personally would like to thank her and her staff, April Veneracion Ang, for their leadership in introducing the resolution to create Soma Pilipinas, our very own Filipino town right here in downtown San Francisco. In fact, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors will make their final vote of approval on this resolution tomorrow. Please give her a warm welcome, Supervisor Jane Kim.
Thank you, Commissioner. It was quite an honor to win the Board of Education race back in 2006 with Hydra Mendoza. I was the first Korean American elected, and Hydra was the first Filipina elected to the Board of Education. So we broke a lot of ground that year. It's really an honor to be here today with our veterans who served in World War II, and to be able to recognize them in our own way for your valor and your strength. This Day of Valor, also known as the Bataan Death March, really exemplifies the best of what humans can accomplish, both in terms of bravery and courage, because I think very few of us can really imagine how scary that experience must have been. But all for the sake of fighting for your country's liberty, but also the liberty of so many other people. My family comes from Korea, and so I grew up very much with the stories of Japanese imperialism and the immense oppression and suffering that happened to my family and to many in our community. Grew up with so many stories of what members of my family who were tortured and killed, and who really depended upon the heroism of very ordinary people who went to a land very far away to fight for people that they may not even have known. And so I want to thank you all so much for your service, because it didn't, in many ways, the suffering did not end once the war ended, because our country really did not recognize and respect the service of our Filipino soldiers who fought just as equally hard as everyone else did in this war to free so many people across the world. So on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, we want to recognize so many of you for your work, but also to recognize those of the following generations that continue to remember these important stories and share it with my generation and those below me, so we can continue this public service. And actually, I should mention, I continue to be a beneficiary of the work of Filipino and Filipino Americans. I represent one of the largest Filipino American communities here in San Francisco, and my work gets to build upon the activism of Filipino Americans that came to the South of Market to fight for so many things, whether it was affordable housing. I see Emil de Guzman, who was one of the original iHotel residents and fighters to make sure that we had housing that we could afford to live in here in San Francisco. I worked with Hydra Mendoza, who not only fights for the Filipino community, but for all families here in San Francisco to fight for better education. And I get to live across from the park, Victoria Manalo Draves, who is the first Filipina to win the gold medal on behalf of our country, and enjoy open space in my neighborhood because of many Filipino Americans that said we need a real park in the South of Market. So I get to present Supervisor Wiener and I some of the commendations to recognize the individuals that continue to fight to recognize the story of our amazing veterans who fought and their incredible story. And so first, I do want to thank our hosts, of course, the Philippine Consul General, Henry Bensuerto Jr., and his wife, who is also here today, and the Vice Consul, Jaime Escalon. And so I have certificates of commendation from the entire Board of Supervisors to recognize your exceptional work in advocating and expanding opportunities throughout the Filipino American community. The City and County of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors extends our highest commendation and honor, and your work is really an inspiration to all of us. And so if the Consul General you so much for being here today. And thank you. Our consulate is so important in bridging our two communities and our two countries and to expanding our friendship and relationship. Second, I want to recognize Robert McHugh from the Memoire Manila 1945. And we learned a little bit about the Battle of Manila that ended with Japanese military rule in the Philippines today. The month-long battle resulted in the loss of over 100,000 civilian lives, as well as many architecturally and culturally significant landmarks in Manila. We want to recognize the work of Memoire Manila in making sure we never forget the brutal attack of this people and city of Manila. I should mention another lesson in the Death March and in this battle is that actually that suffering and loss can lead to the ultimate victory. And it was actually in the march, the Death March of Bataan, that actually allowed the military more time to recruit its strength in order to ultimately defeat the Japanese forces and lead to the Japanese surrender. And so it's actually a good lesson for me in politics when I feel lost, that actually sometimes it leads to ultimate victory in the end, and that it's a much needed and necessary step to get us there. And so in recognition of this tragic moment, but also in your commitment to preserving the memory of this battle, Robert McHugh. Finally, and this is not the last of certificates. Supervisor Wiener will be presenting the final round, but I do get to recognize Cecilia Gerlan, the Executive Director of Bataan Legacy Historical Society. I want to thank you so much for your advocacy to make sure that all students learn this history. Both Commissioner Mendoza and I were the lead authors to institute ethnic studies in all of our high schools in SFUSD. 90% of our students in SFUSD are students of color, and it is incredibly important that we also learn our histories as well. In fact, the reason why I even know of the Bataan Death March is because I studied Asian American Studies, which also involved understanding the connections to our homeland and what happened that led to so many of our Asian Americans immigrating to the US. And if not for learning our history, I think it's often hard for many of the younger generations to understand why it's so important for us to continue this public service and advocacy, that we stand on the shoulders of so many giants. So this is just as important. So thank you, Cecilia, for your amazing advocacy as well. Please stay up for the final thing. Please stay with me. And so finally, this is not a commendation, but on behalf of the entire Board of Supervisors, and I want to present Cecilia this, the City of San Francisco is issuing a proclamation of our support of the implementation of California Legislation 2011 Assembly Bill 199 to include World War II in the Philippines in the history curriculum for all grades 10 and 11 throughout the state of California, and for Filipino veterans of World War II Congressional Gold Medal Act of 2015. And so this is a proclamation on behalf of the board that we will be also issuing and letting know our both the state legislatures, the Assembly, and the Senate of the City of County of San Francisco's Board of Support to ensure that all students get to learn this history as well. So this is also Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.